A definition, first of all, what is a result-based intervention is an intervention where a payment, or at least a component of the payment, is directly linked to and dependent on the achievement of defined and verifiable results. So the payment must be linked to results. So what is a result then? A result is a measurement of a parameter that either has a direct link or reflects pressures and threats that affect the objective where the intervention contributes to. So we base the payment on the measurement of specific parameters that are made either on the field or they are in some cases modeled. What is not a result-based intervention is an intervention when the payment is linked to the outputs. So what, or the change in farm practices, but without measuring the results. So if we measure the direct output of an intervention, then this could not be considered as a result-based. For example, if measuring the length of a hedgerow, which would be an output of planting on maintaining a hedgerow, this could not be a result-based interventions. Examples of result-based interventions will, of course, be presented in the coming slides. Moving forward, let's discuss about some characteristics of result-based interventions. Here we have 3 dimensions of result-based interventions, and we compare them to action-based ones, for which I think managing authorities are more familiar. So first of all, measurement of environment climate parameters. In action-based interventions, we have no measurements. Beneficiaries must actually comply and fulfill the commitments that they have undertaken under a specific intervention. On the other hand, on result-based interventions, we have measurements, and these measurements are either linked to pressures or threats to specific that affect specific objectives, or they are directly linked to the objective. In between, there is the modeled results, where the results are not actually measured on the field, but they are estimated using scientific models. Another dimension is the flexibility for beneficiaries to select the most appropriate management for achieving the results. In action-based interventions, this flexibility either does not exist, so you have some commitments, you have to fulfill them, or there is a palette of commitments and beneficiaries must choose from them, so there might be some limited flexibility. On the other hand, result-based interventions offer unlimited flexibility to the beneficiaries to select the most appropriate management practices to achieve the results. Again, in between are the cases where the results are modeled, because to model the results, you have to have in mind a certain list of practices that can be used and model them to estimate their results on the field. So again, this lies at the middle. And the final dimension is the differences in payment rates. On result-based or on action-based interventions, they are mostly reflecting differences of types of production. So, for example, a grassland payment rate per hectare might be lower than the payment rate in permanent crops or in arable land. On the other hand, for result-based interventions, these differences in payments beyond the types of production, they might also reflect different levels of results. So if you achieve a better result, you get access to a higher payment rate, for example. With this, I hope we clarify a bit what are the main differences between the long known action-based interventions and the result-based ones. So if we move to the next slide, we identified in the report what could be the main factors that may hinder the adoption of result-based interventions. And for farmers, the main issue is the perceived risk related to not achieving or not accurately measuring the result on the field, and since the payment depends on this result, they risk to not get sufficient payment or payment at all. This might be due to exogenous factors. This might be due to the structure of the farm. So is the structure of the farm conducive in achieving the results? How do I know from the beginning whether my farm is capable of achieving these results? What about the biophysical and socio-economic conditions that may affect the achievement of these results? In my area, in my conditions, in my socio-economic condition, are they capable to allow me to achieve the results? And what's the scope of the changes? How much do I have to change my managerial practices to achieve the results? These are aspects that affect the risk perception, and of course monitoring, reporting and verification. To what extent I understand the monitoring process, how I report the results are reported, how they are verified, they all play a role in the risk perception of the farmers. On the other hand, for administrations, we have to think that as administrations are more familiar with action-based interventions, then there are also specific issues when you move to result-based interventions. So first of all, an increased risk of error and increased costs, because you have to rely on other actors to measure the results on the field. Perhaps this is a very big exercise, and this reliance is, unavoidable. Administrative costs to establish all the controls and all the system of the delivery of these interventions. Capacity at the administration side, as I said, more experience in actions-based scheme, result-based schemes seem more difficult to control. And finally, limitations of the legislation. So how they are compatible with the current CAP and national rules. How, for example, we move from measuring results to paying per hectare, which is necessary under the CAP. Or how the Ajax is used under these conditions, or how we estimate the payment rates based on additional costs and income for own, which are also mandatory. It's a mandatory way of calculating the payment rates. For these issues, we have analyzed several examples, and we have analyzed result-based interventions in the CAP strategic plans from Austria, Finland, France, Nouvelle Aquitaine and Corsica, Germany, Ireland, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, and the Navarra region in Spain. We have analyzed result-based schemes outside the CAP, live projects in US, in Australia, in Switzerland, and relevant literature, of course, and input from the members of the thematic working group. And we have tried to give some answers to these issues and what's the role of evaluation to overcome these challenges in adopting and implementing result-based interventions. As I said, we have examples from several member states. Most of them relate to biodiversity. And we have the environment, climate, and eco scheme types of interventions. And as you can see, we have pure result-based interventions and hybrid result-based interventions. What's the difference? In pure result-based schemes, the payment is totally based on the achievement of the results. On the measurement of the parameters, achievement of results, you get the payment. On hybrid schemes, there is a part that is action-based. So there are some commitments that the beneficiary must fulfill and gets paid for these. And there is a top-up, usually, which is based on results. So the beneficiary, the payment of the beneficiary does not depend in total, absolutely on the results, but there is some kind of payment secured, I would say, to a delivery mode which is more familiar for the beneficiary. We have one example on animal welfare coming from Finland. It's a pure environment climate intervention. We have, of course, the Montado management by results from Portugal. It's again an environment climate intervention focusing on biodiversity and soil quality. The ACRIS cooperation from Ireland, a hybrid environment climate, but also cooperation intervention, focusing on biodiversity, water, soil quality. I will give more details on this later. And from France, the transition of practices which cover water quality and climate change. My colleague Guillaume will give more details on that in the coming slides. So let's see now for biodiversity, what is the monitoring, reporting, and verification process? So how the results are monitored and reported, who is doing what, and what tools they are used there. So most of these interventions are using already or are in the process of developing dedicated apps that assist the monitoring, reporting, and verification of the results. And in some cases, also satellite data are used. The management and reporting, there is a huge range, a big range of actors there that play a role. Beneficiaries, they might themselves monitor and report the results using also geotagged photos. Farm advisors, even hired by farmers, might also play this role. Technical staff of local associations or administration and certified experts. Then there is a level of inspections. These inspections may be either at the beginning of the intervention and before the beneficiary is enrolled to, to set a baseline or to inform the beneficiary to what extent as we said, the structure of the farm is conducive to achieving the results or what level of results can be achieved. So there could be an agreement with the beneficiary on the results to be achieved and how they can be achieved. Of course, inspections might come also after or during the implementation of the project. And then there are also on-the-spot checks that verify the results that have been reported by the various actors in the inspections. And these are usually made by the paying agency or by researchers that are involved in the development of the scheme. What are the indicators now in the next slide for biodiversity? As we said, we have a number of interventions identified there. So there is also a number of indicators. We have tried to group them according to their complexity and to whether they focus only on biodiversity or they have a more a bigger scope that may take into account more general ecosystem services. So on the one hand side, with small complexity and focusing only on biodiversity, the indicator is the presence of certain region-specific groups or of plant species. So the number of groups of plant species present is one of the indicators. So it could be 4 groups or 6 groups or 8 groups. It depends on the intervention and the scheme. And if they are found in the parcel that is assessed, monitored, then the beneficiary gets the payment. These are usually called positive species. With somewhat more complexity is not only the presence of positive species, but also the absence of negative ones. So there are certain species, for example, which reflect deterioration of biodiversity. So if they are present, this is not good for biodiversity and you might get a lower score. The presence of landscape elements is another indicator, or the presence of nests of singing birds going to higher levels of biodiversity. Then moving towards ecosystem services, vegetation structures, habitat quality, or the combination of biodiversity indicators and water and soil quality indicators give a holistic picture of the of how beneficial the intervention is for ecosystem services. Moving on from biodiversity to water and soil quality, there we didn't find many examples, and all the examples we found mostly relate to pressures and threats, so they do not actually measure the actual result and the actual effect towards the objective that the intervention contributes to, but the relationship with pressures and threats. So perhaps it is the frequency of use of phytosanitary products in France. So we don't actually measure the active substances in water or the soil, but we measure the frequency of the use. So it's a measure of perhaps a pressure or a threat to the environment. The level of risk to the quality of natural water bodies is another indicator, or the extent of bare soil and erosion in a certain field is another indicator related to soil. We have also found some emerging approaches related to water quantity. So in France, Corsica, they have a specific intervention where there is an action-based component where the beneficiaries are obliged to make some investments and establish water measuring equipment in their fields, so they can measure the consumption of the water in a regular basis. And then they have a theoretical consumption for a dry and a wet year, and they compare the actual consumption with these theoretical ones. It is not a result-based intervention yet because they have not set any thresholds of water consumption there, but based on these theoretical patterns and the comparison of these patterns to the actual consumption, they can perhaps in the future develop some thresholds and transform it into a result-based intervention. But it's a good approach to explore, let's say. Now let me give you an example of such an intervention. It's the Acres Cooperation from Ireland. As we said, it focuses in biodiversity, water quality, soil quality. It takes a holistic approach towards the farm and the services they provide. They use a scorecard. So a scorecard is an info sheet, I would say, with several indicators against which the parcel is scored. I have some examples of these indicators here. One of these is the number of positive species, as we said before. So species that that are beneficial or reflect a good biodiversity status. There you can get scores from 0 to 25 points. But if you have negative species in your parcel, then you get negative points from -20 to 5 plus. So your total score can be reduced if there are negative species present. Another example of an indicator is the risk to the quality of natural water bodies. That is measured there on the field, estimated actually with a qualitative process. There is no measurement, but it is a qualitative indicator. And then you can have a further reduction of your score if this risk is very high. You can lose up to 25 points from the total score, which is 100 for each parcel. Some more details on this scheme in the next slide. There is no baseline, so there is no obligation for the farmer to improve biodiversity during the years. The beneficiary can just maintain the levels of biodiversity. Each farmer is assigned to a cooperation team which is responsible for a specific area. As I said, this is an intervention that is also under the cooperation type of interventions. So there are cooperation teams formed, and they are assigned a specific area, and each cooperation team has background information for each parcel of the zone, and they try to engage as many farmers as possible in this zone under the scheme. So it's not just a voluntary for each farmer, but there is this cooperation team which assists all beneficiaries in engaging and implementing the result-based intervention. The results are measured, reported, and verified by farm advisors which have been trained by the cooperation team, and the measurement takes place 3 times during the 5-year period to reduce the cost and the burden, and they use a dedicated app. Each parcel can get a score from 0 to 10. The payment rates have been established according to additional costs and income foregone based on an indicative set of practices for achieving the results. And this is based also on experience of the long implementation of similar pilot projects in the area. There is no payment for scores below 4, as they represent, let's say, the baseline situation. But after 4, you get a payment, and the payment is not linear, is progressive. So if you move from 4 to 5, you get a payment. But if you move from 5 to 6, you get an even bigger payment than what you get from 4 to 5. How the payments are linked to results. Each parcel, as we said, gets a score. Then each score is linked to a specific payment rate, and the total eligible area, as identified by Ajax, is multiplied with the corresponding payment rate, and the payment is calculated. We have also several examples in the PowerPoint that will be shared with you, but I'm not going to go through them. There is an example from Austria on the management by results, where there are beyond the main indicators, there are also additional indicators that help give a better picture for the farm. There is, of course, from Portugal, the Montado management by results, which again uses some kind of a scorecard, and which also has a very inspiring monitoring, reporting, verification process. A nice example to look for. There is, of course, the result from Slovenia, focusing on bird habitats, with, again, a very interesting monitoring, reporting, verification process, and a very interesting payment sensitivity. So how the payment is conditional to the results achieved. And then from France, there is the plant health strategy, which uses this indicator I mentioned before about the frequency of use of pesticides. There, the interesting part is that the payment rate is calculated as a flat rate, and this indicator on the use of pesticides is also very interesting. Let's move to another objective now related to animal welfare and antimicrobial use. So there we have found, as I said, one example of for animal welfare. This is monitored by certified experts, which report the results to the farmers, and the farmers report them. The farmers that are engaged in the scheme must report the results to the paying agency. The certified experts measure also the situation for non-beneficiaries, but these non-beneficiaries do not have the obligation to report to the paying agency. On antimicrobial use, we have not found any examples, but we suggest a few solutions there if someone wants to try it, by doing monitoring and reporting through dedicated IT systems that can be used by farmers and veterinarians to monitor the situation of the farm with digital tools, and then having a benchmarking between similar farms that can be used for the paying agencies to set up thresholds and indicators for the payments. Let's have a look at some indicators for this. For animal welfare, the indicator is the number of carcasses with intact tails. So it is applied to pig farms. And if the conditions of animal welfare there are not very good, then pigs tend to bite the tails of each other. And to avoid this, farmers may dock the tails of the pigs. And this is, of course, an indicator of bad welfare. It can also increase infections and the use of antimicrobial products. This is actually an indicator that falls under the category of absence of injuries. It's an animal-based indicator. It is measured directly on the animals. And we also explain the use of some other indicators like absence of disease and mortality rate that have been also identified in a previous thematic working group by the Evaluation Helpdesk. For antimicrobial use, the most frequent indicator is the rate between the administered antimicrobials and the population at risk. For the nominator, the quantity of administered antimicrobials, usually there are two metrics. One is the prescribed daily dose per animal, which can be more easily automated, as I said, through these IT systems. Veterinarians prescribe the use of antimicrobials, so you can have the records of the prescriptions, but requires digital tools, of course, and digital systems to be present. Another option is the used daily dose per animal, which is more accurate, of course, because you don't prescribe, but you show what has been used, but requires treatment logbooks. And for the animal population at risk, maximum capacity, number of animals present on average or at a given moment are also some metrics that can be used. Some more details now on the Finnish case, which is under the Finnish CARP strategic plan. It's an intervention for animal welfare. The indicator is the percentage of carcasses with intact tails identified in the slaughterhouse. There is no baseline again. The results are measured and verified by independent inspectors trained by the pain agency, and these results are submitted to the farmer. The farmer reports them to the pain agency if he or she participates to the scheme. The payment rates have been established using additional costs, income foregone, based again on an indicative set of practices that might achieve the results. How the payments are linked to the results? The percentage of carcasses with intact tails, the cumulative actually percentage, is calculated twice per year. If it is greater than or equal to 95% of the processed animals, then the farmer receives the payment. That corresponds to the total livestock units that have been processed in the slaughterhouse in this period. So first period of the year, first half of the year, all animals are inspected in the slaughterhouse that are processed. If 95% have intact tails, the farmer gets the payment for this period. If in the next period, next half of the year, the percentage is 93, they don't get the payment. So this is why they have divided this to two periods, so the farmers don't lose the entire year's money, but they can mitigate a bit the risk.